good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Natural and Applied Sciences overview session for DKU Bound. As I mentioned before, we have amazing representation registered here for the event. So I see people from Bulgaria, Poland, Nepal, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Uzbekistan, the US. So we have amazing representation, and that just speaks to the incredibly diverse global and international student body that we have at DKU. So thank you for joining us today. My name is Allison Lucas, and I'm part of the International Enrollment Management team for Duke Quinshon University. I would like to introduce our speaker, Professor Mark Spaller, Associate Professor of Chemistry at DKU. Professor Spaller will be taking us on a deep dive and overview and opportunities in natural and applied sciences here at DKU. As I mentioned before, we will have a Q&A at the end of the session, so I'll be both monitoring the chat and also opening things up for some Q&A towards the end. And yeah, I will go ahead and take myself off camera and let Professor Spaller take us on a journey here.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for the introduction, Allison, and welcome everyone. Let me go ahead and I will begin first part, which will be to provide an overview of our division, Natural and Applied Sciences. Okay. So this will not be a highly detailed, all-expansive coverage. You will see a number of charts, of course. We're in the sciences, so we have to see charts. But you will certainly be able to learn more about the details. For those of you who end up coming to DKU, it's a process to really learn everything. But this should provide, I think, a fairly good overview of the kinds of things that you will be thinking about and encountering as you start to navigate your way through the DKU process. And I'm going to occasionally have to take a sip of water here. I've been doing a lot of talking lately, and hopefully I'll be able to make it through. So, what to study natural and applied science? If you're here, let's see, then you probably have a mindset that might be akin to this guy. And I start off with this sort of masterwork of art because I think it encapsulates a lot of what is possible when you study the natural sciences. And that is, you don't have to be strictly a scientist and be that narrowly or rigidly defined, because in the days of yore, when we had alchemists and developing science as a method and an approach, and then eventually as a career, science was integrated in many aspects of knowledge. In fact, they used to refer to it as natural philosophy, the idea that we would understand ourselves in the context of the world and the universe. And that sounds very grand and broad, and it is. And in fact, I think scientists then and now have a sort of a strength in being able to understand the physical world in a way which is very grounded in experience, but also they don't have to lose what is of interest to them in terms of day-to-day life and interaction with people and all the other great knowledge traditions. And I will tell you very briefly about my own interest or my own coming through the educational system as a student. I was, of course, a STEM major, as you probably would have gathered, but I did afford myself the opportunity to take as many liberal arts and humanities courses as I could when I was an undergraduate, because I very much find those fields very interesting. And it doesn't have to be an either or. You can be a STEM major in the natural sciences and still be able to indulge in a lot of other great courses that are offered by the other divisions. And I think it makes us more whole and more interesting actually to talk to, aside from all the benefits that comes to having a lot of career options, which of course is real, and I'm not going to overlook that by any means. So when we talk about the natural sciences and applied sciences, both from the basic and the application aspects, there is a tremendous amount that's out there in this 21st century era. But if we go back and really dissect this, there are really three major areas, I think, from which a lot of the many other disciplines, subdisciplines have emerged, and that is from biology, chemistry, and physics are three core foundational disciplines. And as you start to merge them, you find that there is this interdisciplinary dimension that arises. So biology and chemistry, the confluence of the two leads to a biochemical perspective of the natural world. And I pick this out maybe in particular because biochemistry has been one of my own central interests, both academically and research. But you can certainly see how these disciplines have merged to create these other subdisciplines. And the list is even far greater than this. The more you go into the sciences, the more you start to appreciate that there are many areas where there is cooperativity in thought and an application between these different areas. But this is our foundational core. And from that, we start to think of more interdisciplinary types of endeavors. So getting back then to the grounded aspect, because I know that a lot of people go to university not only because they want to learn and to grow as people, but let's be pragmatic about it too. You want to be positioned so that you can develop yourself to having a career and to having sort of a future in which you can actually do the things that you've learned about. And there's this classic question in interviews that you're told to, ask, and to reflect on, well, where are you going to be in say 5 or so years from now? It's an amount of time that's not too short or too long that precludes you from being able to maybe make realistic assessments. And so maybe many of you have already kind of resigned yourself. I don't mean to sound defeatist in that way, but that you will be in school still, hopefully not in university as an undergraduate, but maybe in graduate school or one of the professional schools. And that's fine too, because having a plan and an idea of where things lead is an important part. And it's something that in the DNAS, we're very mindful about for our students. And we provide a lot of coaching and assistance to help develop students on a track that will lead them to the next step after DKU. Okay, so this is also a question you should be asking yourself. And it's also a question that comes up more than once, because as you enter your first year in college, you'll start to realize things are maybe quite different than you had thought, and you've learned a lot more. So don't feel it's a once and for all decision. People very frequently in college, and that's normal and natural. And even myself, I went through different thought processes and career option decisions, especially in the first year. So what kinds of things will you think that you could do? And part of that will maybe be reflected in the kinds of things you do at DKU. So for example, you will learn many things in classes, and I will talk a little bit about classwork, but a big part of being in the natural sciences is research. And that could be computational types of research. It could be what we might consider wet lab, that is in the laboratory. It could be more analytical. But in addition to those research skills, it's important to be able to develop your cognitive and your analytical and your presentation skills. Being able to speak in front of others, being able to communicate information is an important skill area. And so we don't have to think of scientists as being the sort of the introverts who are only focused on their topic of interest, but being part of science in the 21st century is also involving engagement, outreach, being able to not just to educate, but also to help people understand what it is we can do with science, even if you're not going to be a scientist. So there are many different skill areas that you can engage in and develop when you're a student at DKU. And these are very real, tangible skills that will serve you well as you go into, say, graduate school, professional school, and then into your career options. Okay, so here come the charts. Well, we have three primary divisions, as you probably know. In addition to the natural sciences, we have arts and humanities and social sciences. And we have the central area here represents a lot of the core types of disciplines. And you notice that they go beyond what I initially presented as biology, chemistry, physics. We have other disciplines as well, computer science, neuroscience, and whatnot. And from those disciplines, we have created the majors. Okay, so different universities have different majors. There are some that are very classic and enduring, and then there are some that are more interdisciplinary. DKU has been developed as a deliberately more interdisciplinary institution. So you may see majors that are a little bit different in the way that they're named. We don't have, for example, a traditional biology major or chemistry major, but we do have disciplines that actually fold those into these particular majors. Okay, and so you'll see, in addition to all three of our divisions have their types of particular majors, and we won't really be discussing, obviously this is DNAS, but again, it's important to understand what your options are. So whether you're hard fast and really determined to go into DNS, that's great. But again, if you're still weighing your decisions, I really encourage you to take a look at all of these divisions because there's a lot of great faculty and a lot of great things to study in all three of these divisions. Okay. So a slightly more detailed look at this introduces the idea of tracks. So in addition to majors, you can see in the top left here, we also have track coordinators. So our majors sometimes, depending on the major, may have two or more different tracks, which would allow you to specialize in certain areas within that major. So for myself, for example, in global health, I also serve as the track for biology. That is, global health has two tracks, one in policy, and that's represented as a major in the social sciences, and one that has a biology track. So you do have a lot of opportunity to tweak or to focus your interest. Even if you have a primary major interest, you can start to subdivide and to look at different areas within that if you have a particular preference for one direction over the other. So you can see within this particular, this circular depiction here of the different majors, global health and environmental science, material science, applied math, computation, computation design, molecular bioscience, data science, behavior science. There's quite a lot on offer. And central to these are a lot of the methodologies and tools that these disciplines use. So even if you are in very different types of majors, say, global health versus computation design, you will make use of a lot of common tools and analytical methods. And that's why we have, for example, math and statistics within this central area here. So when you do start to explore major options, in addition to speaking with let's say the faculty in the courses you happen to be teaching, well, I'm kind of jumping ahead of myself, that you're learning from, maybe again, one day in about 20 years, you may be teaching, or less in the university yourself. But I would encourage you, and this is one of the things that I may end up saying more than once, don't be hesitant to reach out to faculty. And I don't mean just like in office hours and asking questions, but just for career advice or suggestions. You'll be assigned an academic advisor. You may end up having a research advisor. But the point is that all faculty that you encounter are people who are willing to share information with you and to talk with you. So even if they're teaching you math or chemistry, feel free to reach out to them if you feel that they can help you sort out different aspects of your interest and maybe make career recommendations. So faculty are a great resource, and one of the reasons which presumably you are going to come to DKU or to go to the university of your interest. So here we have the track coordinators listed, but again, feel free to reach out to any faculty if you feel that they could help you. Okay, all right. Now, coursework is, of course, central to being a student. I don't think I need to tell anyone that. And you'll have a lot of options to choose from. I also want to elaborate a little bit on the comments I made about research. And research for students in any division is fairly important, but I think especially so for those in the natural sciences. It's in the research where you end up implementing, making your knowledge, your classroom knowledge into something more tangible and real. And so one of the things that you'll want to do when you enter the university is to start surveying the landscape, seeing what's available, because pretty soon you'll need to be making decisions about what research opportunities to pursue. And this could be at the level of individual faculty. It could be teams of faculty, or it could even be research centers, and DKU provides opportunities for all of these. Approaching faculty is, as I mentioned, something that you should do. Be proactive. You're going to be presented with a lot of information. I think we do a pretty good job of informing, but you can't be passive and just simply receptive of this. You need to also take additional steps to kind of probe and inquire and find out additional opportunities, because what's right for you may not be something that's going to be immediately presented to you. So reaching out to people and talking to people is going to help a lot. There are a number of research programs we have. I won't go through all of these in detail. If you go onto the DKU website and you search for undergraduate research, you'll find descriptions about all these, but these are all different kinds of opportunities that are meant to support our DNAS students in their interest. The signature work, which you may or may not have heard about at this point, is going to really represent the sort of culminating research experience. It's going to take about 1.5 years or more if you start doing research earlier. But this is, again, something that all DKU students have to do, not just DNAS, but this is something that in which your own personal, your own research activities can fold into your signature work. Okay. So to elaborate a little bit more on the research centers, there are the Environmental Research Center, the Global Health Research Center, the Applied and Physical Sciences and Engineering. These, again, are collections of faculty who have thematic interests, and these are also areas in which I would encourage you to pay attention to when there may be open houses or there may be opportunities to have attend presentations by these research centers. And again, don't feel shy about reaching out on your own. Any of these faculty, even if they don't offer anything, maybe it's not something that has been announced officially, maybe through emails or whatnot. But again, feel free to reach out. And some of the venues, again, where you can find out information are through the website postings, email announcements you'll get through your DKU email. You should, again, be proactive in contacting research centers and as well as individual faculty. And you may ask, well, how do you find out, aside from these different ways that information is disseminated, how can you find out what people are doing? Well, if you haven't tired of me saying this, reach out and talk to faculty, ask them, what are you working on? What are you interested in? There's also, for example, on the website, this research news, which is updated, and you'll you'll happen to see like highlights of recent research activities that different faculty are involved in, and there's the link right there at the bottom of the screen. So again, there are many different ways that you can inform yourself about what's going on and what faculty are doing in terms of their research. And don't neglect looking outside the confines of the university. So there are a number of opportunities. For example, during summers, if you may have internship opportunities, there are some summer activities at DKU, but it's also an opportunity to work outside of DKU if you can find an internship or some other kind of collaborative interaction with, say, another faculty at another institution or whatnot. I only show this one particular opportunity because it was fresh on my mind. I had one of my signature work students attend this Sigma Chi scientific student research showcase, and she presented her work in this particular venue. So this is something that, again, you need to be proactive about learning about opportunities. Again, we try to inform our students about the things that are available, but there are many that we do not know about. And so this would be, say, an example of what you could find out on your own. And there are other types of venues where undergraduates can contribute their research. Okay, and so finally, I'll just wrap up with this slide, which highlights our animating principles. You may have learned that the guiding principles of our institution, which are shown here, I won't read them out, but basically they're meant to give you a sense of really what's important to us, not just as a division of natural science, but as a university. And the many aspects of what I've discussed, and many that you'll discover for yourself once you arrive at DKU, are embodied in these principles. And it's a growing process, right? You're going to be thrown in your first year. It's going to be a lot of sorting out of what's going on. There's seemingly so many things to do, and you'll have to make decisions. You'll have to make painful decisions, what to do, what not to do. You'll have to, unfortunately, leave some things by the wayside just because there's a lot that's on offer and you only have 24 hours and you have to sleep at least for 2 of those, right? Anyway, no, for the record, I advocate getting at least 7 to 8 hours of sleep every night. Okay, all right. And anyway, so I think by the time you get through the end of your DKU experience, that you'll have had a chance to really live through a lot of these principles in practice, and they won't seem like abstractions, but more like actual real things that are embodied in the things you did while you were a student at DKU. Okay, all right. So that concludes my brief and whirlwind tour of DNAS at DKU, and I am happy to answer any questions that might come up now.
What does like the homework load look like for the week, excluding Friday or whatever that would be like for you?
What does the homework load look like? So I will put in the caveat, of course, that I cannot speak for all of the DNAS courses. I think we're mindful that most of us are quite mindful that that students do have other courses, even though we always feel that our course, the one we're teaching, is the most central one and the most important one, right? And I mean, you wouldn't want to have a professor who didn't think that their course was especially important, right? So I think to answer your question, I can say that in my own case, I try to make homework kind of contextualized, meaning that this is the stuff that's particularly important, and then this is the stuff that will sort of be helpful for you. It may further enlighten you. but it's not necessarily strictly required. So I tried to be more specific. And I think maybe a more important piece of advice I would give is that when you first take a course, you're like on day one, or when you have access to the syllabus, really analyze what is being asked of you. Okay, I think students sometimes make the mistake of not really looking at the syllabus. They kind of think, whatever. But the syllabus has a lot of information in it, which is highly relevant, and including a sense of what the workload is going to be. And if you find that you're getting behind, which is not a rare thing at all, because there's almost an infinite amount of studying one can do about any topic, that's the time to also start to go to your instructor and ask them, am I doing the right thing? Here's how I'm approaching your class. Am I spending too much time or too little time on anything? So that's probably the best advice I can give you as far as what you should do if you're encountering a lot of homework and you find yourself really just with your heads buried in the book or watching videos for an extensive amount of time. I hope that's helpful. Basically, it kind of gets back to my advice of talk to faculty. And I suspect I may end up saying that a few more times. I think one of the challenges is also that with each passing year, we kind of learn more in the sciences in a way that we don't necessarily learn more in other knowledge domains. That's not to knock or diminish, for example, a field where you're studying things that haven't really changed in a significant way, even though they may be difficult and a challenge for people to learn and understand in the first place when they first encounter it. But in the case of the sciences, every year there's a new wrinkle to biological systems. For example, we understand things that are in more complexity, and so this is what can make it difficult in science classes, because we feel an obligation to impart on you this relevant information. I feel like when I teach biochemistry, for example, I don't want you to feel like you haven't gotten the full scope of what I think is important to understand and to help on to the next level. So, faculty are human too. In a sense, it can be too much of a good thing where we really want you to succeed, but sometimes, we're not as fully empathetic about what it's like to be a student, in which case you need to go to your instructors and talk to them. Most of us are quite reasonable.
Another question that we had is, how and when can I connect with an academic advisor? I have some specific degree-related courses that I would like to discuss. So what does that process usually look like for connecting with advisors?
Right. So each of you will be assigned an academic advisor, and that person may or may not be aligned with your divisional interest, meaning that if you are for sure knowing that you want to go into the natural sciences, you may have someone from arts and humanities or social sciences as your advisor. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with this, because in your first year, technically and actually you haven't selected a major. So in fact, that's not done until the latter half of your sophomore year. So you'll have a good year and a half of coursework that may be broader, maybe if you're still exploring. And so an academic advisor in that first stage is really meant to help you navigate that initial time. So to get to the specifics of your question, you should be informed who your academic advisor is. I don't know exactly when that information is communicated, certainly before you arrive at DKU, but if there's something that you need to have addressed sooner rather than later, then you should reach out to the academic advising office or the advising office. There is a centralized office, and you can contact them with your specific questions if it's something you feel needs to be addressed before you arrive at DKU. Otherwise, once you arrive, you'll be assigned an advisor and start to connect with them at that point.
Awesome. Thank you, Professor. So one student asked, thank you for your presentation. Can freshmen conduct research at DKU or become research assistants during their first year?
I think, yes, there's no reason that that is prevented or precluded, but it does really depend on what kinds of background the student has. And some faculty may not be willing to have students involved in certain types of laboratory work until they have covered certain courses, that they've taken certain courses so that they have some background knowledge. There is no hard and fast rule. I think in practice, a lot of students don't start until maybe their second year or even sometimes a little bit later, although the second year is kind of probably a good time where a lot of students do this because they've kind of figured out a little bit what they want to do, and they've had some fundamental or foundational coursework. But that said, everything that I mentioned before, if you find that you're really keen on somebody's research, you can reach out to them even as a freshman, early on. Make sure you've done your homework. In this sense, the homework is, of course, meaning that you've done some investigation about what they're into, and if you have a personal interest in the area, if you've done something like that in high school. Again, there's no specific regulations that prevent that. So I would encourage you, if you feel like it's an area that you can contribute to as a freshman, absolutely start to reach out to people. And even if you don't do research in your first year, it's certainly a good idea to reach out to learn more about what different faculty and research centers are doing.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Excellent. I think that's an excellent resource there. One of the questions we have, Professor, is can a DKU student complete the general and natural science courses at DKU, and when spending a semester at Duke in North Carolina, complete the 4 engineering courses to get a BSc degree? I think that's a pretty complex question there.
That is a complex question, and I don't know. I have not heard of any students who have tried to pursue a BSc. Keep in mind that the majors, even though there is you will get a dual degree, right? You will get a degree from Duke. The majors that you're selecting from are those at DKU. All right, so you're not registered as a student at Duke, and you are not following their major courses, their sort of major plan. So my suspicion is that might not be allowed, probably not be allowed, but since I have not encountered it, that is a very specialized question that I would direct you to ask. You could maybe start off with the advising office, or possibly with the Office of Global Education, the OGE. I'm not quite sure who would be best suited to answer that question, but maybe the OGE, because they deal with the Duke Abroad program. And that would be my recommendation.
Yes, that's my suspicion as well, too. And I think that's an excellent point to note, that while you are earning a Duke diploma, that the courses that you're taking at DKU and at Duke as well were specifically designed and agreed upon to essentially fit into this program. So the courses that you're taking at DKU and Duke are not necessarily there to transfer interchangeably between the 2 universities. So that is an important thing to note. But again, if you have further questions on what that process looks like, the courses that you're taking at Duke University, the Office of Global Education is an excellent resource, as they are the ones that monitor, that study away semester on the Duke campus, and will also have more specific questions related to the breakdown of those degrees. So let me move on to the next question here. So we have a question: do professors use class organizing softwares where they post assignments and grades, also including posting lecture slides or lecture notes and slides on software if it exists?
We do have a learning management system. We're in transition now. We used a LMS called Sakai. So for those of you entering this fall, you may have some courses that are using Sakai, and some that are using the newer LMS that we've adopted, Canvas. So maybe Sakai is probably not as well known. Canvas is certainly more well known, and different faculty will use these LMS platforms to different degrees. Speaking for myself, I typically would post the lecture slides, assignments, etc. So anything that was relevant to the course would get posted to the LMS, the learning management system. So that's something, again, that should be clarified with faculty, with your instructor. If it's not addressed in the syllabus, it's a good first day question to ask about what resources will be available on the LMS. Again, it's either going to be Sakai or Canvas.
And Professor, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming that if you have any additional learning accommodations that need to be made, that those resources, you would work with your professor to make sure that those accommodations are being met.
Yes, and I don't remember the full the order in which one needs to approach this for more formal accommodation, but I thought there is also a student accessibility services office.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think they may be one of the first places to contact to find out what the procedure is, because this is, there's a procedure. It's not sort of an independent decision on the faculty member necessarily. If there are accommodations in the official sense, then I think it has to go through that accessibility services office.
Yep, absolutely right. All right, let's see what's next here. So we have a question here. I'm interested in biotechnology. Do you think that majors at DKU's DNS majors can prepare me for such a pathway?
Yeah, so biotechnology is, this gets to questions about what we mean by a discipline or a field, because you can major in different areas and still have potentially the background that would be suitable for a biotechnological career. For example, in material sciences or biological sciences, really the name of the major, and that's not to say that it's only a name and there's no substance behind it, but it really depends also on the coursework you've chosen within that major, but also very substantially what research you've engaged in. So let's say you wanted to go into a graduate program that specializes in biotechnology, or let's say systems biology. We don't have a systems biology major, but you could potentially take one of several different majors that would qualify you to go into systems biology. Based on, again, the coursework you chose, the electives, maybe you would take certain electives that were more aligned towards that. I don't know off the top of my head what biotechnology related electives might be available, but that's something that you would want to look into. And certainly the research you engage in, which would depend on the professor or research center you work in, could involve biotechnology, even if you are a material science major or a molecular bioscience major or what have you. Okay, so the major name isn't, I think, going to be as limiting as some people think. Like if you are a material science major, doesn't mean you can only go into some kind of field for material science. There is a lot of wiggle room, and graduate programs recognize this. So at my previous institution, I was on the admissions committee of our graduate program, and it was relating to experimental medicine and biological studies. But we had chemistry majors, we had microbiology majors, we had a variety of different majors. And really what we would look for is to see, well, okay, what kind of courses they've taken, but also what kind of research experience that they've had. Okay, so don't feel like that you have to choose a certain major in order to be positioned to develop in a certain area. And I would say that for biotechnology, there are certainly different majors that you could pursue. And then with the right choice of research experience, you could develop that particular skill set so that you would be in a position to pursue sort of the next level of whatever you're interested in vis-a-vis biotechnology after you leave DKU.
So just a couple more questions here. So from other webinars, I learned that you can focus on a track you're interested in, even if you may be under a certain major. For example, majoring in environmental science, but then doing a track in marine science.
So when we use the word track, we are speaking somewhat formally because environmental science has 3 tracks, if I'm remembering correctly: the biology track, the chemistry track, and the biogeochemistry track. So each of those represents, you could think of it as a different major, having different major requirements. There's a lot of overlap because all 3 of them are under environmental science. As far as the marine biology or the marine science, I don't remember what the question involved. I don't think that would represent a formal track, but you could certainly, based on the research you pursued, and if there was any coursework you took that supported, let's say, your studies in marine biology, then you could present yourself as being someone who had that kind of focus, with that kind of thematic emphasis in your degree. But strictly speaking, it would not represent a track as it would appear on your diploma.
Perfect, thank you. And as a final question, so do DKU programs and DNS major options prepare students for potential engineering pathways, either in work or in master's programs?
I think I don't have any direct experience with at DKU with mentoring students who have gone or have an interest in, let's say, engineering, but certainly I could foresee a lot of overlap depending on the type of engineering you're talking about. Is it, electrical engineering, civil engineering? It depends on the engineering, but certainly based on the coursework one took, I could imagine that someone would be competitive for graduate programs in engineering. Again, to reiterate what I've said on several junctures, not just the coursework, but also the research that you were involved in.
Absolutely. And I can
admissions. Oh, I'm sorry. And so admissions committees, keep in mind, admissions committees are not going to be overly rigorous on the actual name of the degree. Well, to an extent, right? So again, you could have several different degrees, and based on your coursework and your research experiences, you could be eligible for, say, engineering. If I saw that you had a humanities, major, that might seem a disconnect, and you may not be eligible for an engineering program in the eyes of many committees. But theoretically, it could be possible if you took enough of the engineering related courses and you did some kind of research into that. I mean, that's kind of an outlier hypothetical. But the central point is, don't get too stuck on being limited to just one type of major, because several different majors can lead to a certain path. But that's the kind of question that's very case specific, and you would want to discuss this with your advisor and with the advising office or other faculty who are involved in that area. And again, this gets back to this idea, getting advice from different faculty, especially those who are in areas that you want to pursue. Whether that person is your academic advisor or not, you should reach out, because they can provide career advice as to the best way of getting into the graduate program you may be interested in. I'm sorry, Allison, you were going to add something?
No, I was just going to add a note. I do know from our outreach that we did for the class of 2022 graduates, we have one of our students that graduated from DKU and transitioned straight into a PhD program in chemical engineering at Columbia University. So that's a perfect example there that absolutely it is possible to move into those engineering fields post-graduation from DKU. So as Professor Spaller said, it a lot of times can depend on the coursework, the research, and the kind of the work that you're doing even outside of your major as well too. So that's my piece from what we've encountered in admissions as well.
Right. And in the words of Shakespeare, what's in a name, right?
Exactly.
So don't get stuck on the name of your degree. Admissions committees are willing to look past the title or the name and to see what you actually studied and what you actually accomplished in your research activities. And that can make all the difference.
Perfect. Okay, well, I think that wraps up the end of our questions here. And yeah, thank you so much. Please, everyone, give a huge thank you to Professor Spaller for taking us through. I know this is a super chock full packed information session, so I hope you all learned from that as well. And I will leave the session open for a few minutes just in case anybody has any lingering questions, but otherwise I will let everybody go, and we hope to see you in our next coming up events as well.